So this happened the summer after I turned 26, and I want to be upfront about something before I get into it. I've told this story maybe a dozen times, and every single time, at some point, the person I'm telling it to pulls out their phone and starts Googling, trying to find the towns I'm going to mention. I'm telling you right now, save yourself the trouble. I've already done it. I've done it more times than I can count, over more years than I want to admit, and I have never once found them. Not one, which is either the most unsettling part of this whole thing, or it's the explanation for all of it, depending on how you look at it. It was me and my buddy Derek. Derek and I have been friends since high school, the kind of friends who have a shorthand with each other, who can sit in a car for 8 hours without running out of things to talk about, but also who can be completely quiet together without it being awkward. Good road trip friend energy is what I'm saying. We've been talking about doing a big drive for a couple of years, and that summer we finally had the time and the money, or close enough to the money, and we decided to drive from our city out to the Pacific Northwest. Take about 2 weeks, no rigid itinerary, just go. We left on a Thursday morning in late June, the kind of morning that's already warm before 8 a.m. Sun up and going strong. The whole summer ahead of you. We had a rough route sketched out, a playlist that Derek had been working on for weeks, a cooler in the back seat with drinks and snacks, and that feeling you only get at the very start of a long trip where everything is possibility. I love that feeling. I think it's one of the best feelings there is. The road in front of you and nothing decided yet. The first couple of days were exactly what you'd want them to be. We moved through the flat middle of the country, the long, open miles of it, the sky doing that enormous thing it does, out there where it goes from horizon to horizon without interruption. We stopped at diners and ate bad good food and drank coffee that was too strong and talked to local people who wanted to know where we were headed. We found a motel on the second night that charged $40 a room and had a pool that was maybe not entirely clean but was cold, and we swam in it anyway at 10 at night, and it was great. Everything was exactly right. The weirdness started on the third day. We were somewhere in the western part of the country. I'm going to be deliberately vague about the exact geography here because honestly the specifics got slippery as the trip went on and I don't want to misplace us. We were west of the flat part, into the beginning of the bigger landscape, the kind where the ground starts to roll and change and you start to see rock formations and the vegetation gets sparse and the colors shift toward red and brown and ochre. Beautiful country, empty in a way that feels ancient rather than lonely. We needed gas and we've been watching the gauge creep down for a while. Derek had the atlas, an actual paper atlas, bought at a gas station the morning we left, because we were that kind of trip, and he'd been tracking our route loosely. He said there should be a town coming up in the next 15 or 20 miles, a small one, but with a gas station marked on the map. I said great, and we drove. We found the town. Or we found something. It was small. Smaller than the map suggested even, just a handful of buildings off the main road, a couple of streets, but it was there. We turned off the highway, drove down what passed for a main street, found a gas station on the corner that had 2 pumps and a little attached convenience store with sun-bleached signs in the window. We filled up. I went inside and grabbed drinks and asked the guy behind the counter how far it was to the next decent-sized town. He told me. I paid and left and we drove on. About an hour later, Derek was looking at the atlas and he said, "Hey, what was the name of that town back there?" And I said, "I don't know. I didn't catch it." And he said, "Well, I'm trying to find it on the map and I can't figure out where we were." I said, "Well, maybe it's just small. Not every little dot has a name label on it." He said, "Yeah, probably," but he kept looking. I could see him out of the corner of my eye, turning the atlas pages, retracing our route. And after a while he said, "I really can't find it." I said, "Let me see when we stop." We stopped for lunch at a bigger town about an hour further on, a real town with a diner and a pharmacy and a hardware store. While we were waiting for food, I looked at the atlas. Derek had marked our rough route in pencil, the way we'd been doing, and I traced it back. There was no town where we'd stopped for gas. There was a mark on the road, a small symbol, but it was the symbol for a scenic overlook, not a town. No gas station symbol, nothing. I said, huh, and Derek said, yeah, and we decided the atlas was just incomplete or outdated and moved on. Except it happened again. We'd been watching for motels for a while and hadn't seen anything, and it was getting late in the afternoon. That golden hour light that's gorgeous to drive through, but also means you've got maybe 2 hours before dark. Derek said according to the atlas there was a small town about 10 miles up that might have something. We found it. Small motel, a dozen rooms in an L shape around a gravel parking lot. A woman at the front desk who gave us a key attached to a big plastic fob and pointed us toward the vending machines. Clean room, clean sheets, working shower. Fine, good even. We ate at a little place down the road that was half bar, half restaurant, and had some of the best green chili I've ever tasted in my life. I'm not exaggerating, and we slept well. In the morning, Derek got up early and took the atlas outside to the picnic table by the parking lot while I was showering. When I came out, he was sitting there with the atlas open and a look on his face that I hadn't seen on him before. I asked what was up. He said, I cannot find this town either. I sat down across from him and we went through it together. We were methodical about it. We knew roughly where we were. We knew the highway number. We knew the general direction we'd been traveling and the approximate mileage since the last town we could definitively identify on the map. We triangulated as carefully as two guys with a paper atlas can triangulate, and there was nothing where we were. Just road. Just a long, empty stretch of road with nothing marked on it. Now here's what I want to say about how we handled this, because I think it matters. We did not immediately jump to the weird explanation. We are not those guys. Derek is an engineer. He's literally trained to find the logical answer. I'm skeptical by nature. We sat there and we went through the reasonable possibilities out loud. The atlas was old and small towns appear and disappear, especially in rural areas. We could have taken a wrong turn somewhere and be slightly off our plotted route without knowing it. The atlas's scale made it hard to show every small settlement. All of these things were true and reasonable. But we'd been tracking our route carefully. We'd noted every turn, and Derek, who again is an engineer, was not satisfied with the atlas's wrong explanation. He said, look, I get that atlases have gaps, but we've stopped at 2 places now. That should at least have something near them on this map, and there's nothing. Not even a dot. Not even a name. We decided to be more deliberate about it going forward. We'd note times and mileage and be really precise about our position relative to the map. The third town was where it stopped feeling like a puzzle and started feeling like something else. This was the next day, late morning. We'd been driving for a couple of hours, tracking carefully, Derek calling out landmarks and mileage marks and making notes. We needed gas again and food, and according to our careful tracking, we should have been coming up on a stretch of road with nothing on it for about 30 miles. No towns, no services, just road. We came around a long curve and there was a town, not a tiny cluster of buildings, an actual town, not big, but real. A main street with a few blocks of buildings, a hardware store, a diner, a post office, a couple of other storefronts. Cars parked on the street, people moving around on the sidewalks. A real town, fully populated, fully functioning, in a place where our careful tracking said there should be nothing for 30 miles. We pulled over and sat there for a second. Derek looked at his notes and then at the atlas and then out the windshield at the town and then back at his notes. He said, this shouldn't be here. I said, I know. He said, but it's here. I said, I know. We drove down the main street slowly. It felt normal. It looked normal. People glanced at us the way people in small towns glance at cars they don't recognize. Acknowledging, not particularly curious, just noting the presence of strangers. We found a diner and parked and went in. The diner was everything a diner should be. Counter with stools, booths along the window. A woman who'd been doing this job for 30 years and moved through the room with the ease of someone who knows every inch of it. She brought us coffee and menus, and we ordered, and while we waited I asked her what the town was called. She said the name. I'm not going to write it here because I've spent years Googling it and finding nothing, and I don't want to do that to you in the middle of this story. But she said it clearly and easily, the way you say the name of the place you've lived your whole life. Like, of course this is the name. What other name would it have? I asked her how big the town was. She said about 400, maybe a little more. I asked how long the town had been there. She said as long as she could remember. Her parents had been born here, their parents before them. I asked if there was a lot of through traffic. She said some, not a lot. Most people who came through were locals going between towns or the occasional traveler who'd gotten a bit turned around. I said that last bit back to her, turned around. She smiled and said, "You know how it is out here. The roads can get a little tricky. GPS doesn't always do well in this country. People sometimes end up places they weren't quite aiming for." Something about the way she said that. Not ominous, not dramatic. Just easy and matter of fact, like it was a thing she'd said many times to many people who'd found themselves sitting at her counter looking slightly confused. We ate our food and it was good and we paid and left. When we got to the car, Derek sat behind the wheel without starting it for a second, and then he said, "What did she mean, turned around?" I said I didn't know. He said, "Because we weren't turned around. We were tracking carefully. We know where we were." I said, "Yeah." He said, "So why are we here?" And that was the question. Not a scary question, not a horror movie question, just a genuine, practical, what is the explanation question, the kind that Derek's brain was built to ask. We were here. We knew where here should be on the map. Here was not on the map. We had not taken a wrong turn. So why were we here? We never came up with a good answer. The rest of the trip was normal. We got to the northwest, saw the mountains and the coast, ate great food, took a lot of photographs, drove home a different route. Nothing strange happened on the way back. The 3 towns were a contained thing, something that belonged to the outbound journey and didn't follow us home. But I've never stopped thinking about it. I've talked to Derek about it many times over the years, and he always engages with it as a genuine puzzle, which is very Derek. He's never settled on an explanation he finds fully satisfying. He tried for a while to locate the towns using modern satellite mapping, cross-referencing the general area with everything he could find, and came up empty. He said to me once, and this is the thing I think about more than anything else he's said about it. He said, "You know what the strange thing is? Not that we found the towns. The strange thing is that the towns were so normal. They were so completely ordinary, nothing threatening, nothing overtly weird, just small American towns in the middle of nowhere that shouldn't have been there." He said, whatever those places were, they weren't trying to scare us. And I think he's right. Whatever those places were, geographic anomalies, places that exist in some fold of things that doesn't show up on atlases, places that the maps just haven't caught up to, or something else entirely that I don't have a framework for. They were just places. The woman in the diner had been making coffee and taking orders for as long as she could remember. The gas station attendant at the first one had sold us gas and told us how far it was to the next town. The motel woman had given us a key on a big plastic fob and pointed us toward the vending machines. Whatever kind of real they were fully committed to it. I've thought a lot about what she said, the diner woman. People sometimes end up places they weren't quite aiming for, like it was a known thing. Like it had happened before, like there was an understanding in that town, some low-level ambient awareness, that occasionally travelers showed up who had come by unexpected routes and you gave them coffee and took their order and sent them on their way. And they'd leave and probably never find you again on any map, and that was just how it was. I think about the people in those towns sometimes. The regulars at the diner, the folks buying hardware at the hardware store, the kids who grow up on those streets that aren't on any map. Do they know? Do they have any sense that their town is something other than what it appears to be? Or is it just home to them, just the place they've always been, fully real in every way that matters to the people who live there? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. What I know is that we drove through a stretch of country on a warm June day, and we stopped 3 times in places that didn't exist according to any map we could find, before or after, and in each one, people were going about their lives. The lights were on. The coffee was hot. The green chili was the best I've ever had. I still think about that green chili. I'd go back for it if I could find the place again. Derek says if we ever do that drive again, we should try to take the exact same route and see what happens, whether we find them or drive right through empty road. I always say, yeah, sure, let's do it. We haven't done it yet. I think we're both a little afraid of which version we'll get. Afraid, or maybe And maybe this is worse, afraid of what it means if we find them again, what it means to find a place that isn't supposed to exist and have it just be there, normal and warm and fully itself, like it's been waiting, like it knew we'd come back.